Let's draw a character, a female, and give her clothes because I want to draw folds. So we're gonna draw a girl and we need some light to make cool shadows. What does that give us? Lamp woman. Well, hello there, I'm Détroit. Just in case you didn't know, I make 2 drawing videos per week. On Thursday it's ink drawings and on Sunday it's digital like today. If you're more interested in only one kind of drawing, I have playlists for you on this channel. Subscribe so you can benefit the most from it. So as I said in the intro, I'm sketching a female character. The reference is actually the picture I showed you, this one. The pose I like a lot, and you could have guessed it since it's very similar to the Thinker, the original character I drew a while ago. It is a good dynamic pose that you can recognize easily, and in the reference picture, the woman is wearing clothes with a lot of folds and twists, like her open shirt. Even her jeans are loose and not that tight, so we have nice folds around the knees, for example. To sketch, I am using an inking brush with pressure opacity and an 8-point size. I wanted to use blue for the sketch because it feels more sketch-like than black, but it's still dark enough so you can see it on the white canvas. In this drawing, the sketch feels very natural. The pose allows for nice natural curves for the arms and the legs, for example, with also zones of higher density. I'm talking about the belly and torso area where the complexity of the folds contrasts with the simpler shapes. Due to the pose, I have no choice but to draw feet and hands, which is something I'm not passionate about since it's hard, but I can't avoid it all of the time, so it's good practice. The feet are probably the hardest for me because any slight deviation in the S-curves that make the outline will immediately ruin it. And feet have 5 toes, which makes it 5 times harder too. For hands, it's much more simple. What I'm often struggling with is the finger length in relation to the palm size, but I think today I managed it pretty well. I mean, it's not a very hard hand to draw since the fingers are straight. If you need a tip about hand pose, I have a good one for you. For a relaxed and natural hand, give the fingers the slightest curve and put the major and ring finger together. It makes it both simple and interesting, and now that you know about this trick, you'll see it pop up a lot in drawings. For real, everybody does it and nobody bats an eye, so you know it's good. Of course, as I said, the character is wearing a lampshade over the head. At the same time, I don't have to draw a head, face and hair, so that shaves at least 20 minutes of the drawing process. Let's get into coloring, since I already talked too much about the sketch and the inking isn't really interesting, other than the fact that it's blue. For the background, I already know I want an old house room vibe, so I'm adding faded red vertical lines, brick-like in color, over a cream background. I'm using the same faded red to lay the flats over the sketch. In fact, I'll keep that red throughout because I like it on the open shirt. Since the inking is not closed, it is a bit of a hassle to flat, but it's still relatively fine. With a clipping mask, I'm using different colors to delimit all the areas, like the jeans, the skin, the t-shirt, the lampshade, and even the bits of hair. After all the colors are in, I want to tweak them a bit, and to make it easier, I'm removing the clipping mask and using the outline flat layer to crop all the other layers to the proper area. The main change in color I'll make is to make the arms blue instead of green. I like the contrast between the blue and the brick, both desaturated, it gives a nice feel. Something you might not see quite easily but that definitely plays into the overall vibe is changing the texture of all the flats. When I drew the vertical lines, I used a brush that represents a big leaf. The way this brush is made, it will play a bit on the saturation of every stroke, very lightly, but it makes the color more interesting. By doing it on all the layers, it makes the entire drawing more natural and less synthetic, as if the colors were not perfectly even. You can see it as emulating a textured surface, like parchment or something. The most interesting part of this drawing, for me, is definitely the shadows. I tend to draw my cartoonish shadows in a very simple way. I want to change that and make the shadows more interesting. And already I'm starting not with shadows but with light on the jeans. It's the same anyway. I want curved shadows, made almost entirely with curves, even with peaks at points, like you would draw a cartoon flame. That, combined with the folds, makes the cloth look more fluid and less flat. Just like the flats below, I will also use the textured brush on the light once it's good. For this kind of lights and shadow work, you have to think not in terms of realism, but in terms of drawing. I am purposefully not making too much sense of the light, in a reasonable way. I'm drawing shadows where they look good, instead of where they make the most sense. For example, on the girl's left arm, the shadow has no real reason to peek inward, but it looks better and more dynamic like this. However, you have to remember that it's a light that comes from under the lampshade, so it still needs to make a bit of sense. And for example, the raised chin looked too strange with the curved shadow, so I'll be changing that. To finalize the drawing a bit, I am adding colors to the lampshade, which I haven't really touched so far. Using a double gradient of the shirt's red, I'm making the top and bottom of the lampshade a bit darker. Same for the vertical lines on it, which serve to remind us of the background pattern. Up to now, the light coming from the lamp and the girl's head, I presume, has only been implied by the shadow. Only I don't want to make the lampshade any lighter in color because it would ruin the composition and the overall tone a bit. Instead, I'll go over my line work only for the shade and make it very light yellow. I'm also turning the top of the line art for the character to a lighter blue and darker at the bottom. These are only fine details, but they are the kind of things you would miss without knowing if they were not here, just like the texture of the flats. To finish this off, I want to tie the girl in with the background a bit more by putting shadows on the ground. I tried to make the shadows make sense for a bit before giving up and making a circular dark glow. Again, it's a case of what looks good rather than what makes sense. The way the light source is, the real shadows wouldn't look like this at all, but it's better this way. Out of order, I'm also reddening the bottom of the picture a bit, adding a rectangular frame around it and making a bigger faded shadow around the girl to show the edge of the shadows cast by the lampshade. Oh, and since the big empty zone that is the lampshade is boring, I added the semblance of a silhouette of the girl's head in it. Again, the light doesn't really make sense. And that's pretty much it. I'm really happy with how the lights and shadows on the folds turned out. I think it's very dynamic, at least compared to my usual way of drawing it in a cartoon style. Tell me what you think in the comments below. I had a ton of fun playing with the colors and the textures on this one as well. I don't usually use this sort of desaturated color palette, and making the skin blue, for example, was a nice touch, I think. Like and subscribe if that kind of art is your jam. Again, there's plenty more where that came from. In fact, you can find all of my art on Instagram at d3_sd, and you can come say hi on Twitter at d3. This girl may be a literal light, but in my heart you shine even brighter. I'll see you around. Bye!